Today, I'm super excited to speak with Liz, who is a first-time mom and a member of my signature program. And Liz had such a great birth experience and postpartum recovery, and she accepted to share her story with us today. So Liz, thanks so much for being here.
Glad to be here, Sophie.
So you're the mom of Theo, who was born 8 weeks ago on November 14th, which, by the way, is my dad's birthday. So I know Theo will be great. And yeah, my first question for you was, why did you decide to sign up for my program in the first place?
Yeah, so I think like a lot of first-time moms, I knew absolutely nothing about birth and postpartum. I was the first one in my family to have a baby, so I hadn't been around, a lot of family members or even friends who had gone through birth and postpartum. And just from watching how it's portrayed in the media and kind of the few conversations I'd had with other moms, I had it in my head that it was going to be this terrible, painful, scary event that I was going to have no control over. And postpartum itself was an absolute mystery to me because that's not something that's often portrayed in the media. Mm-hmm. And none of my friends had ever really talked about it. So that's kind of where I was at going into this pregnancy. Not a great place.
So kind of being in the dark, not really knowing what to expect.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, I really wanted to educate myself and learn, more information about birth and postpartum. But one of the things I was finding was that the more research I did online, the more overwhelmed I felt with the amount of information that was out there. Mm-hmm. There's so much, and it's hard to tell, what's good information, what's not good information. And it's just really hard to kind of decipher what you should be, looking at, what you shouldn't be looking at. So actually one of my partner's coworkers had mentioned that she had taken a course with a local pelvic floor physiotherapist to help her prepare for birth. And I remember my first thought being, what the heck is a pelvic floor physiotherapist? So after I heard that, I was like, this might be something worth looking into. So that's when I contacted you for the discovery call. And honestly, Sophie, like your program sounded exactly like what I was looking for. So I really was looking for something that would kind of guide me through all aspects of birth and postpartum and give me specific instructions and techniques on how to handle everything. I I just thought it sounded great. And I think, as you know from working with me, I'm somebody who really likes to follow step by step. Kind of instructions. So that's your program just sounded great. And I was like, you know what? Yeah, let's do this. I'm on.
Yeah, board. I remember our first call. I was like, we are such a fit. Like, I remember, like, I felt like it was the right thing for both of us to work together. And I really like that sensation. It's like, yeah, I want this person in because I knew the program would answer your needs.
Yeah.
And do you remember if you had any specific fears about either giving birth or postpartum, like before you met with me?
I guess my biggest fear was that I wouldn't be able to return kind of to my active lifestyle. So going into this pregnancy, like I was a very active person. In the summers, we did a lot of hiking and camping, canoeing. We did a lot of workout classes. Sorry, my partner and I, he's who I'm talking about when we say we. And in the winter, same thing, get out snowshoeing, go for walks, do some skiing.
Very Yukon lifestyle.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Typical Yukon lifestyle. And a lot of women in my family. So my mom, a bunch of my aunts, they all had symptoms after birth, and they never recovered. And they've been living, their whole lives with these things like, incontinence and pelvic joint pain. And I didn't want that to be my reality. So that was definitely kind of one of the big fears that I had going into all of this, is that the same thing would happen to me and I wouldn't recover. And I would, be living the rest of my life, peeing when I jumped up and down, or, things like that I've seen from family members.
Mm-hmm. And now you know that it's not something that you should accept, and there is something to do.
Exactly. Yeah.
And now
Absolutely.
talking more about your birth story, how did it all go for you?
Yeah. Okay. So it went really well. I honestly can't even imagine it going better. So yeah, so I'll kind of just explain how the whole process went for
Yeah.
me. Um, so about 2 days before my actual labor began, I started experiencing prodromal labor. So that for me presented as mild contractions consistently every 15 minutes. And I knew it wasn't real labor because the contractions weren't getting closer together and they weren't getting stronger. Um, so yeah, basically for 2 days, I just kind of had what you could compare to maybe mild period cramps. But yeah, just consistently every 15 minutes. Um, but then on the Sunday morning at 5:30 a.m., it's like a switch flipped, and I knew I was in real labor because instantly my contractions began increasing in intensity and frequency, and they kind of just had a different feel to them overall. They kind of felt like full body waves as opposed to just period cramps.
Okay.
It's kind of hard to explain, but I knew I knew something was different. So that's kind of when your program kicked in, and I started thinking about the pain management techniques I learned.
Uh-huh.
So I labored at home for about 6 hours. And during that time, I relied pretty heavily on breathing, the pelvic pressure point techniques that my partner and I practiced in person with you,
Mm-hmm.
to get through the contractions. I also did things like bouncing on the exercise ball. I had music going. I sat in the shower for a while. So yeah, kind of all things you had mentioned in your program. And then I eventually got to the point where my contractions were about 4 minutes apart and the pain was becoming pretty difficult to manage. So that's when I decided to go to the hospital. And when I got to the hospital, the nurse checked and I was about 8 centimeters dilated. So I was pretty far along
Wow.
by the time, yeah.
Good for you. Like, this is huge to go from 0 to 8 on your own at home, like managing on your own. This is great.
Yeah, yeah. And yeah, and I was gonna say it wasn't that hard, but it was hard. But honestly, with the techniques that I had, it was pretty manageable. But yeah, so once I got to the hospital, I had a few birth wishes, and I call them
Mm-hmm.
wishes instead of a birth plan because I know that situations can change quickly, and I didn't want to have a plan set in stone. So I discussed my wishes with the nurses. So that included things like how I wanted to push, what I wanted to have happen as soon as the baby came out, and kind of in the event of a C-section, things I kind of hoped could happen. So I discussed that with the nurses before things got any
Heated.
further along. Yeah. Well, I still, kind of knew what was going on. And then I asked for an epidural. I think going into this, my hope was that I could do it without the epidural, but honestly, it felt right. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Listening to
So
your intuition and what felt right at that moment.
yeah, exactly. So yeah, I asked for an epidural, and unfortunately, the anesthesiologist was on call, so it took a while for her to get in and administer the epidural. But eventually, she showed up. I got the drugs, and it was like immediate relief. I
Oh.
honestly couldn't believe it, which was nice because it gave me a bit to relax and just kind of rest,
Mm-hmm.
which I think was pretty helpful. Um, yeah, so right after the epidural, I didn't feel the contractions at all, and I was able to get up and walk around, which is something I didn't expect because again, in the media, often you'll see people with epidurals and I think this happens in real life too with some people, and they just kind of become paralyzed, can't move and can't feel anything. But I could still move around fine. And it wasn't long after I got the epidural, basically, that I was ready to push. I was fully dilated. The doctor was there, and she said, "Yeah, we can we can get this going." Um, so one thing that happened before I began pushing was they had to break my water. So my water didn't break at all, which is not what I was expecting.
Mm-hmm.
Because again, not knowing anything about birth and just kind of going by what you see in the media, your water breaks and then your contractions start.
Yeah.
But that's absolutely not what happened for me. So the doctor broke my water. Wasn't painful at all. It was, she just had this kind of hook instrument, and yeah, kind of just went in and she broke it, and then I felt a gush of water. And yeah, basically from then on, that was the pushing stage. So pushing was actually something I was really looking forward to. Because with everything I learned in your course, so, the different pushing techniques, breathing techniques, and I had actually practiced them a bit with you. So I had a lot of confidence that I had a lot of confidence in what I was doing in the pushing stage. Yeah. So I was
awesome.
Actually excited for it. Yeah.
And also it feels, I think what people say is it feels like an active part of labor where you have direct impact on what's going on, versus in labor, I think it's a lot of like waiting, and then someone checks your dilation, and then it's like, oh yeah, you're farther, but you don't have that concrete, oh yeah, I feel my baby coming out.
Yeah, exactly. Kind of with the labor, you're just kind of getting through the contractions as they come. And yeah, like you said, there's not much you can do, but in the pushing, like that's when it's your time to shine. It's great.
Awesome. Spot on.
Yeah. So I actually began pushing on my hands and knees. I knew I didn't want to push on my back. So yeah, I began pushing on my hands and knees, and then eventually I moved to pushing on my sides. And during the pushing stage, I actually began feeling the contractions again. They felt like a really, really, really intense pressure. And even with the epidural, they were still quite painful. But the doctor said that that's normal, that even with the epidural, often, the pushing will still be very painful. But it was good because the contractions are cues for your body to push. So I was actually really glad that I could feel them.
Yeah, because you can tune in more and just kind of coordinate with that for your push.
Yeah. Yeah. So the doctor actually didn't have to coach me at all because I could feel the contractions and I knew when to push. I knew how to push. I knew the breathing techniques. It was great. So I pushed for just under an hour before my little guy was crowning. And then once that happened, he was out in 2 pushes. Yeah. So Theo actually came out with his little hands up beside his head. So because of that, I did end up with a 2nd-degree tear. And I do just want to say that for anyone who's nervous about tearing, you absolutely do not feel it in the moment. Like you won't know it's happened until the doctor checks afterwards and tells you. So don't worry about being able to feel yourself tear. Like that's really not how it works at all.
Because by that point, everything is painful and there's so much pressure, right? And so I don't think the tearing makes a difference in that scale.
No, it really doesn't. Yeah. So obviously people might be nervous about it, but it's really not something to waste your precious time and energy being nervous about.
That's sound advice.
Yeah.
So, that's awesome. And so how did you feel after delivery and your recovery in general?
Postpartum recovery was actually so much harder than I thought it would be, Sophie. Especially with my tear and stitches. I didn't realize kind of how much pain I was going to be in until I was in it. And on top of that, trying to figure out how to take care of a newborn baby.
Totally.
It's so much all at once and it's so hard. But your program was really great in that it covered literally every symptom that I was experiencing and more. Like you put forward so much good advice, so many good tips and tricks to deal with everything.
Thank you.
Oh yeah, it was great. So my biggest symptom that I was trying to manage was the pain from my tear. So things like, the donut cushions, padsicles, the sitz baths, the peri bottle, those things were all lifesavers. And those were all things that you had laid out in your program. So I knew to have them beforehand. And I honestly don't know how I would have gotten through it.
Well, that's really good to hear, because it's always, how the program is laid out with like video lessons. And I always wonder, will they think of going in the program and watch those lessons? But I think if you are in pain and you are looking for solutions, you will definitely go and watch them.
Yes. Definitely. Like I had a few other symptoms too. And I watched all your videos, and yeah, your advice was so great. You had, like I said before, you had so many good tips and tricks to manage symptoms. And yeah, it was wonderful.
And it's nice to have them accessible right away, as opposed to be like, oh, I'm going to wait to see the physio in 6 weeks or whenever that is, or when you see the doctor. Like you
Yeah.
can just watch it right away and get started right away.
Yeah, because your first appointment, well, I guess we had a follow-up appointment the following week, but that was for Theo. It wasn't really for me. So yeah, the first appointment with my doctor was 6 weeks after, which is a long time.
Yeah.
That's a long
And
time to
there's
deal with
so much
symptoms.
going on in that 6 weeks. It's the most symptomatic phase, right? And that's where you want the guidance.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and it was very helpful that it was all in one place too. That was another key thing.
And what about the exercise part in the program? How did you find that part? Because
Oh,
I
man,
remember
yeah.
when you came to my office, I was so impressed. 6 weeks post, you had your workbook that you had printed and all the check marks for the exercises, and you had done all the reflection goals and stuff like that. And I was like, oh my God, she's so on it. And I just couldn't believe, like, having a newborn, like how dedicated you were. And yeah, so how was that part for you? How did you make that happen?
Oh yeah, that was great. So first of all, my partner actually printed that off and made a little book for me. I have it here. So he actually, printed it off and then bound it together.
That's
I
awesome.
had my little, yeah. But as I mentioned before, I'm a very physically active person, and I had no idea what to do right after birth. I was like, can I start doing lunges? Can I start doing squats? Like, what can I do? So just the fact that you had exercises laid out week by week, with how many sets to do, how many reps per day, that just took all the questioning I had out of getting back in physical activity. So that was just, that was perfect, Sophie. I don't know what I would have done without it, to be honest with you. I probably would have spent just hours online trying to figure out, what can you do? What should you do? Yeah.
That's great.
That part was great.
And how are you feeling now, like having done all this work? Like, how, I know that you said the first few weeks were hard and painful, but now you are 8 weeks postpartum. So how are you feeling in your body, like in terms of returning to activities and all that?
Yeah, I feel great. I feel so much better than I thought I ever could, just based on how I was feeling those first few weeks. But yeah, I basically, all my symptoms are gone. I don't have any more symptoms. And just getting back into exercises feels so good. Obviously, I'm not working at the same intensity that I was pre-pregnancy. But yeah, I'm able to do everything I did before, and I feel great.
Oh, that's so awesome to hear, because that's the main outcome of the program, is to fully recover from birth so you can go back to your previous lifestyle without having, like you said, your aunt or your family members who were like, oh, I'm still peeing when I jump or things like that. That's the outcome of the program, is to not have that. I guess another question for you was for more about your partner, because we haven't really covered what your partner has learned through the program, or how it helped them to, navigate your journey.
Definitely. So going into this pregnancy, my partner, like me, was absolutely clueless about every aspect of birth and postpartum. Luckily, he was very open to learning with me. So we actually ended up watching a lot of the program videos together. And not only did he do some of the online content with me, but he actually came to a couple of my in-person sessions where we worked on some of the pain management techniques. So that was really great. It helped him kind of develop a really good knowledge base for what to expect and how he could help. So he also didn't know what to expect postpartum, and that was a big thing. And I think the information in your program really helped him to have realistic expectations of what I would and wouldn't be able to do, which helped him know what he could do to support me. so for the first month, like he did all the housework. You know, he carried the car seat around. He made sure I always had a glass of water, made sure that my postpartum bathroom supplies were always in stock.
Wow. The
Yeah, so
dream.
it kind of is. Yeah.
Like your postpartum doula, but it's your partner.
Yeah, essentially. But yeah, like these are all things you wouldn't have known to do without your program. So yeah, it was really helpful for both of us.
Aw, that's awesome. And I guess my last question is, would you recommend the program to a friend who's pregnant?
I absolutely would recommend your program to a friend, and in fact, I already have.
I know. And every time I hear someone referred by you, I'm like, okay, I want this person in the program because Liz was so stellar student that I want all of the Liz in the world.
Yeah, no, Sophie, honestly, like your program it provides such a good knowledge base for birth and postpartum recovery. And another thing that was great was the opportunities to connect with other women and yourself through the Facebook group and the weekly calls. Honestly, those really made me feel less alone in my experience, just kind of knowing that there are other women out there that, you know, you can reach out to, and so that was really great. And this is kind of sad to say, but I kind of felt like you were the only healthcare professional who actually cared what happened to me after giving birth. So it was really comforting knowing that I had you in my corner and I could rely on you with any questions that I had, or if I needed help with anything.
Totally.
Yeah.
And you did attend a lot of the live calls in pregnancy specifically to ask your questions, and
Yes.
Which is nice, because otherwise people are left with either nothing if they are in an area where they don't have any pelvic floor physio, or they have to wait for their appointment to ask their questions.
Yes.
But through the live calls, you can just log in every week and ask me whatever you want to ask.
Yeah. That was so great. So great. I think, Tofi, I believe the term magician has been thrown around to describe you, Sophie, and I think every woman deserves a little bit of magic in her life.
Oh, this is the best. Well, thanks so much, Liz, for talking to us about your experience. That's so appreciated, and I wish you the best moving forward.
No, thank you, Sophie, for everything.
No worries. Bye.